to Alaqa, a podcast about the relationships shaping systems, capital, and the climate transition. This special playlist is developed in partnership with Change Now. We welcome some of the fund managers who presented during Funds for Change. Since they only had but a few minutes on stage to explain the unique angles, the sophistication of their approach, the urgent needs they want to address, we decided to offer them more time and broadcast their ideas to a wider audience. Today, I'm joined by Vincent Gradt, co-founder and managing partner of Impact Earth. Vincent is an investor and operator with more than 20 years of experience across impact investing, natural capital, and frontier markets. He previously led Mirova Natural Capital and was instrumental in launching AXA's impact investing strategy in 2013, helping shape some of the field's earliest institutional approaches to sustainable finance. So why is Vincent with us today? Sometimes as a founder, an opportunity can be obvious to you, but not to the rest of your peers. And that's where the magic of traction and value creation operate. And that's also where impact in real life appears. In the case of Vincent and his team, they see two not so obvious things. One, the Earth's tropical belt is the key geography to focus on. And two, resilience of tropical ecosystems is not a side outcome of climate capital strategies, but a necessary condition for financial returns in tropical natural ecosystems. Hello, Vincent. Welcome to Alaqa.
Thank you, man. Hello.
Good to see you. I'm saying this to every single guest on this special season of Alaqa with Change Now. I can't believe last time we saw each other was already 2 months or 2.5 months ago.
I agree.
Crazy.
Time flies. It's unbelievable. So many things happening. No, it's crazy.
Yeah.
It's always the same, when it's May, June, and when you have kids as well at the end of the school year. So a lot of things are happening and in all space. We'll talk about it. So many things, so many events as well. Positive, less positive things as well. But time flies, definitely.
So Vincent, I'm very happy to welcome you here because when I introduced a number of the funds who pitched at Funds for Change and who showcased what they were working on, your fund particularly resonated with me because through reviewing your deck with the selection committee, I learned so many things. And I think it's great when a fund manager and a fund manager team bring something unique to the table. Even if people don't invest the first time immediately, it helps, at least it helps me to tweak a little bit my worldview. So thank you for that. And I'm excited for this discussion, Vincent. So would you like to tell us a bit more what's your fund all about and why you do what you do today?
No, absolutely. Very happy to do so. And then just to share with you, I think the topic is just to bring a vision. And you can have different visions in the market, but I would like to share today what's the vision of impactors when it comes to nature and investment in nature. More than saying, okay, we are unique, we are very good. Actually, I'm very happy if you have plenty of impactors and plenty of competitors. So it's not about saying that we are better than others. It's more about sharing what we do, the reason why we do it this way, and then we believe we can be smart when it comes to investing in nature.
So let's hear it.
So we manage nature-based solutions. So, of course, impact investing. Nature, it's a broad topic, actually. You can put a lot of things under the nature umbrella. Maybe just to give us a very quick introduction, let's start again with the planetary boundaries. I love to do that. Why there is a need for change and what it needs today to stop, to reverse the limits we are facing today. And I'm not going to talk too much about natural ecosystems because I hope it's obvious for a lot of people, maybe not for everybody, but for a lot of people who are going to listen to this podcast. I would just say that today you've got critical ecosystems across the tropical belt to protect and restore. So if you think in terms of priorities, the big one is in Latin America, that's the Amazon. And that's why we launched a few years ago a fund in the Amazon. So it's a very complex environment. I'm going to talk about it briefly. But the priority was really top down. Okay, start with the Amazon. What can you do there so that actually you can be catalytic, you can create change as well. And then from there, we'll expand to other key regions across the tropical belts because there are so many things to do. So you've got a big one in DRC, a bit complex as well, but you've got many things to do in Southeast Asia as well. So that's the starting point. So then the discussion is, what can you bring to the market in these specific ecosystems? So I love to talk usually about ecosystems and also what we call a system approach. Mm-hmm. And what we're trying to solve or to bring when we think in terms of systems, mm-hmm. it's actually a series of things which are complementary. I would say the first element is always, even if you think in terms of natural restoration or conservation, always go for the system and the link, the interconnection with economic activities. And the reason is that basically you've got people living in these ecosystems. What I'm going to say is obvious, but the cliche of thinking, for instance, about the Amazon, huge rainforest, where you just have snake and monkeys. Nobody. It's like you've got more than 1 million people living there. So if you want to protect the forest and the broader ecosystems, you need to make sure that especially vulnerable populations, they can make a living. They can live with no trade-off when it comes to their natural environments.
Well, we're not talking about conservation at the expense of the populations. That's what you're saying.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. So, the cliche of basically building walls or putting barriers, usually it's not working well.
Like a reserve, yes.
Yeah, like a reserve. So you can have that in a very specific context, but not at the scale. Of course, not at the scale of the Amazon. And then always think in terms of local population and the kind of economic activities you can create for them as well. You need to link them. So, of course, it's a contract. So what I'm saying it's a contract is that you need to value nature. So the way to do it is to say, if there is a production of commodities, then you need to give a premium in your offtake for conservation or restoration activities. So that's one of the key. And then you need to make sure that in terms of time horizon, you take a very long-term view as well. It's a challenge for us investors because very often we've got a fund behind, so you need to have a 7, 10 years, 15 if you're very lucky view. But you need to build processes, businesses, sustainable businesses, which are going to last very long, 30, 40 years and forever, ideally. Then when you think in terms of system as well, so that's a very important part, another part of what we're doing in terms of capital continuum. So if you think in terms of scalability, often the mistake is to think that if you pile money in one champion, indeed you can put a lot of money at play and you can invest at a larger scale.
And it feels safe.
Because you've got something or a project or a company which is more mature and you believe that it's probably less risky. But you can't necessarily create what we call a diffusion model. So long story short, if you have one champion restoring, conserving or having like a sustainable economic activity in a specific ecosystem, it's good, but it can't be sufficient. So you need to think in terms of diffusion. So you need to have a broad ecosystem of players and then self-sustaining. If you have not like one champion, but 50, 100, thousands of stakeholders in a specific ecosystem, then it's going to be up and running by itself. And then it's going to be much more, less risky and probably more scalable.
But then what's your role with Impact Earth and with your broader experience? Because you've been active in this field for many, many, many years with you and your team. So what do you bring and what is your role? Because the way you're describing it sounds very nice, very reassuring.
Yeah.
Very, it seems like it's smooth. But the reality is that it's not smooth for many reasons. So what do you bring to these projects or to these companies to help them deliver the promise that you just explained, to either do conservation or restoration in a way that is aligned with the planetary boundaries, in a way that is aligned with the respect and the dignity and the economic stability or economic conditions of the living populations there, etc., etc. What's your role to catalyze this?
Yeah. So just coming back to this diffusion lens, and of course we can talk about having fair deals, making sure that local communities are represented. That's another very important part of the job. But just in terms of system approach.
Yes.
So what we do is several things. First one is we always connect, so complementary businesses together within the same portfolio. So we're not going to have like conservation, restoration activities without a sustainable business linked to it. And then when it comes to sustainable businesses, let's split that into like upstream, downstream part of the value chains. You need offtake. You need brands, you need B2C, you need companies with an ability to find a market as well. If you want to extract a premium, or even if you just want to scale things to create volumes as well and opportunities, then it's very useful in a system approach to connect producers, productive systems with off-takers, and then with the sales bits. So that's what we do. I think it's important when you look at less mature ecosystems in terms of ticket size as well. So it's not to say that, okay, investing earlier is better. Basically, the goal is to say you need to create this capital continuum. So if you want to be able to find projects which are going to be scalable, you need to be able to do a lot of developments. So you need to have all the acceleration platforms. That's very important. That's not a job that I'm going to do because you already have great players on the ground, but you need this intermediate step, like investor with the ability to take a long bridge, typically 5 to 7 years, before a project or a company can reach the minimum scale and viability. And then you bring that to all the stakeholders, and that's great because you've got more and more of them. Can be DFIs with large ticket size, can be larger funds as well. And maybe just to give you an example, a very concrete example of the bridge. So I was last week in Brussels at the European Commission, and the topic was like, how can we scale basically investments, so sustainable business models and nature projects or restoration conservation activities in the Amazon, specifically in Brazil. And so you had different stakeholders, so you had basically top-down politics, very good. We need rules, we need regulation, very important. You had large investors as well in DFIs. And then at the other side of basically the room, you had basically the entrepreneurs living in the Amazon, indigenous representatives as well. And it was a great illustration of the gap. I was a bit in the middle, and people were asking, saying, yeah, but we don't see basically money flowing in our companies. I mean, we'd love to scale, but actually we reach a wall because actually everybody's talking about money, but we don't see it on the ground. And then on the other side of the table, you had wonderful people. You had, for instance, I remember EIB, so the European Investment Bank, saying, oh, but we've got huge program in the Amazon, but our starting point, that's 200 million. So we're going to start investing at 200 million euro. And then you see, here it was obvious, but you see the huge gap between basically the big money at play. It's great, we need that. And basically the reality on the ground, which is a lot of small scale entrepreneurs. And you need basically several stakeholders in between. So you need early stage money, you need growth capital, and then you need mainstream capital as well. And if you don't have this continuum of player, if you don't have every piece of the puzzle, then it's very difficult to have an ecosystem up and running.
There's still a market building phase when it comes to financing these projects.
Exactly. So our role, I would say, in the space is really to bring, if you take basically the financial analogy, it would be like venture, early growth funding to entrepreneurs and projects.
Can you give us an example of a project or company that you funded, that you financed, just to give us a sense of the kind of projects that you are drawn towards?
Yeah, several examples, but maybe I'm going to start with one, which is probably not in terms of social impact, the most impactful, but interesting to illustrate the gap. Even if you believe that it's less risky, the lack of capital for such project. So that's an interesting one because in Brazil, we had the first concession on public land restoration. So what happened is Brazil, so, okay, you've got basically the federal level, but all the environmental policies, they happen at the state level. So in the Amazon, you've got a collection of different states. You've got a state of power, which is critical, which is super active as well, with a lot of willingness to promote positive policies. Basically, the public concession restoration. So big news in the market, you could argue that partnering basically public authorities in Brazil could be seen as less risky when one of so many things to say in terms of risk, but one of the risks that's basically land security, land ownership, land title. So here, basically, you would have a concession, so that's granted with a long-term view. And then in terms of implementation risk, you always have shocks. Maybe we'll talk about it, climate change impacting the design of the project. But in the end, you need, in a smart way, but you still need to plant trees. So it was on paper, something that you could model pretty well, and something with some form of security and with a long-term contract. But we were very surprised. We were thinking, okay, this kind of mandate is actually, and starting with 20,000 hectares of restoration. So not small to start with the option to top up and to go further. So we were thinking, well, this kind of mandate is pretty not for impactors, which is basically a relatively small GP. We're not very visible in the market. But then local stakeholders, technical experts, project developers, they came to us very quickly saying, actually, nobody wants to bring the funding bit. So we partner with Systemica, a Brazilian developer, and then we put a proposal for the concession. And sadly, we were the only proposal received by the state. So I hope we did a good job. So in the end, we were selected because it was good and it was strong. But you did not have any competition on this one, which is unbelievable for such a project with visibility, potential scale.
So you're feeling clearly a gap, a missing point?
So the gap is huge. So, I'm very lucky because I've got with the Amazon Biodiversity Farm, the mandate to finance this kind of project. And again, relatively early stage. So we did it. And after 2 years, now it's a very different game. So now we talking to off-takers. That's one of the things you need to do to bring extra security. And then basically we're trying to bring co-investors as well. And after 2 years, you can see that indeed there is appetite in the market. So co-investors are coming, slowly but surely. And then we're going to be in a good position to scale and to bring the funding needed to cover the first 20,000 hectares of restoration. So it tells you that indeed you've got a lot of potential in the market. And when you reach basically the right critical milestones, then you can tap into the more mainstream money. But you need to have basically the first leap of faith. Otherwise, and if you don't have this kind of player in the market, then it's difficult. It's still very difficult to find opportunities. So that's what we try to bring to the market. So you need to de-risk, you need to bring capital to start to scale, to bring, again, any project or investee to the right level in terms of minimum requirements. So that's super critical, especially, again, here we're talking about the Amazon, but with the Tropical Resilience Fund, we're going to have borderlands in terms of geographies, in ecosystems where needs are huge and the ecosystem is not mature yet.
Thank you for that. You are actively fundraising and meeting on a regular basis with LPs. What's the biggest objection you face today and how do you address it? And especially coming from the perspective of somebody who's been active in this field for many years now, who's developed a high expertise, and the way you talk about it, it's interesting because you immediately go into the technicalities, into the nuances, into the overview and the gaps and etc. But and we all know, and our listeners know, that not all LPs have this level of sophistication and understanding of what's behind. So what's the biggest objection you face today?
So I would say this year, the biggest one, that's clearly what's happening in the world, priorities, volatility. And it's an interesting one because if you have a look at all the different headwinds, we've got many of them. Indeed, policies, priorities, that's a big one. But then controversies as well. Carbon, so we're not a carbon fund, but indeed carbon is very useful if you want to transition from point A to point B, so even if it's to bring new economic activities to smallholder farmers, carbon is a very powerful tool if you want to help this transition. So you need that, but in parallel, you're facing controversies and projects, standards, a lot of uncertainty as well on compliance versus voluntary, the local environment, which is very different from a country to another one as well.
Yeah.
And then the price as well, the demand side is quite volatile. So 2 years ago, basically the signal was really strong. Today it's different. So people typically, the kind of questions they're asking is, yeah, but look at what happened with Microsoft, which was one of the big off-takers, if you take carbon, the voluntary carbon market. So they decided to pause, so that's very bad for the market. So it means that indeed your strategies are at risk. And coming back to the experience, if you try to summarize everything that's happened in the world, of course, but also in the nature investment, let's call that a market, nature investment market, over the last 20 years, it's absolutely crazy. It was very confidential. Then the carbon market, as you know, it was up and down. It was crazy, a boom, complete collapse. Then nobody was acting, nobody was transacting. Then you had basically a new boom as well. And in the end, to make a long story short, indeed, you've got volatility. You have to ride it. But it's so short term. And what we often tell to LPs is that actually when you're here for the long term, and even if it's not for the 40 years or the 50 years, you need to implement properly a project. But even for 10, 15 years, you're going to adjust. So maybe to tell you something crazy, and I don't even know today. Let's take the biodiversity market, biodiversity credit. A lot of hopes 2 years ago. Today, everybody's saying it's dead. But maybe there will be opportunities in 5, 7, 10 years. And maybe for me, it's going to be one of the exits for some of the projects. So what we say is that indeed, yeah, you've got a lot of parameters moving, but in the end, I'm going to say something obvious. But if you have basically a good project behind, where you can demonstrate all the co-benefits, social, biodiversity, carbon, and if you have economic revenue streams attached, then at some point, you're going to use all this lever, and maybe you will have some form of change and flexibility. You adjust the degrees of importance of every single underlying revenue streams, but you'll always find a way to find a solution. You will adjust, and if at the end of the day, the revenue stream is not carbon, but biodiversity credit, so be it. If it's a premium because you have wonderful cacao, coffee production, and then there is a huge recognition in the market that basically the biodiversity value needs to be embedded in the price, then so be it, I'm happy. And at the end of the day, rather than trying to find an answer for every single revenue stream, you have to say, if you have a good project, if you have a good productive system behind, if you have all the local communities linked with the project, you'll find a way. You'll find a way to actually to make it viable. And it's true that that would be my experience over the last 15 years. Sometimes your exits or your revenue streams are not the ones that you initially expected. And so in the end, the big discussion with a lot of LPs is don't be too stressed by the short term. Take the long-term view. And you have to understand that there will be ways for so many projects and companies to find a way to promote what they do.
It's very interesting how your asset class, if we call it this way, although some may consider that nature is not an asset, so but it's another discussion for another day. But it's interesting that your asset class can be seen, relatively comparable to infrastructure, to long-term fixed projects, something very clear with a long-term visibility and predictability. It's very interesting that, in fact, what I'm hearing is that there's an element of ingenuity
Yeah.
and also capacity to listen to the living system that has been built essentially through the project, with the local communities, with how nature is reacting to the project, how the project developers are doing their work, the public authorities, etc., which is a living system by itself.
A living system. Yeah.
Yeah, it is a living system by itself. And so
Exactly.
listening to that living system and adapting to the circumstances to find relevant revenue streams to make it fly and resilient economically, I think it's a very interesting approach and a bit paradoxical for something which looks like from afar like infrastructure, but in fact is not that. The components or the basic ingredients are not the same, even if from afar it looks like that. Very interesting. Thank you, Vincent.
And maybe you need, actually, to be fair, you need to have a mix of the two approach. So you can say that nature is one infrastructure, and then indeed you can have you can have payment for ecosystem services. If you have a long-term offtake contract, so be it, that's perfect for.
No, you have a visibility. Yeah, that's another story. Yeah.
But it's not going to necessarily be replicable infinitely. And you've got a lot of other context projects where you need to constantly adjust. Again, carbon market can be one tool, but maybe it's not exclusive as well. Maybe you can be smart and iterate, and maybe there will be another payment for ecosystem services in 5 years' time, which is going to be much more relevant for the market. Or maybe there will be different laws, regulations, context as well. So again, going for this adaptive approach, that's critical. That's critical.
Thank you, Vincent. Now we're going to finish this conversation with a flash round. Big questions and short answers. Okay?
Yeah.
First question. What stayed with you after Change Now?
So many things. Collaboration, the fact that you've got, I was amazed, so many great people, diversity of stakeholders as well. People doing very different things, but all together, cooperation is key. And I found it very encouraging to see different people talking to each other.
And second question, so at the heart of Change Now, and you said it just a minute ago, there's collaboration between players. So what would it take, in your opinion, to have GPs, so investors, collaborate more in your space?
That's an interesting one. So maybe, if I may, before GPs, because GPs is one part of the universe, like investors. But
of course,
collaboration within platform, that's super important. We are trying to do that in Asia right now. So we've got something that we call the Natural Catalyst. And the idea is to be completely open source. And so you welcome GPs, but also corporates, off-takers, accelerators, entrepreneurs, advisors, technical providers, a few specialists. And then you share everything you do. And then you try to create some form of synergies between different stakeholders. And it works really well. So that's great. So I think first corporations, that's beyond GPs, right? And then when it comes to GPs, I would say we need, actually, I'm not sure to answer your question, but we need more GPs. I would say sometimes people are saying it's competitive because you've got lots of them, but we need even more of them. Again, I'm biased because I'm thinking more GPs, you create more opportunities as well. So then you scale a market. And then if you scale a market, you've got more room for more deals. And so it's even better. So instead of a competition, I see that as a market building exercise. I would say today, you don't have enough people with capital at play. And capital at play is super important. I mean, you've got, unfortunately, people and they struggle a bit to raise money. So you've got a lot of announcements or shadow funds or empty funds. But people right now deploying actively in nature-based solutions. Yeah. Unfortunately, it's like a family. We know everybody. At some point, we work together. So it's still a small ecosystem, unfortunately.
It's still early.
It needs to grow. Yeah.
Okay.
And when it will grow, then it will unlock more opportunities, and therefore, there will be more cooperations. So that was a long, pretty weird answer, but that's the way.
No, not at all. Not at all. You know, everybody speaks from their own vantage point. And not all of you are yet to be built markets, still emerging as in maturing markets. Others are in markets which are more mature and where there's a clear competition or sentiment or feeling of competition between players who look a lot alike. what you're talking about, and you spoke about it earlier, is that there are so many gaps, there's so many needs and so many gaps which are unmet, that in fact, yes, not the more the merrier, but the more credible, the easier.
The more credible, the more capital at play, the more capital, to make a long story, the more capital at play, the more you can actually create this ecosystem, and then it becomes synergetic, and then your opportunity set or your universe, if we use, again, investment terms, is becoming bigger. So instead of, again, that's a typical example, it's not a pie you're sharing. If you have more capital at play, you grow dramatically the pie, and then you don't have a problem to share it.
So there are many pies with many flavors, many textures, and recipes.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you so much, Vincent, for your time, and thank you again.
Thanks, man. Always a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Alaka. If this conversation sparked something for you, share it, leave a review, and subscribe for more dialogues at the intersection of capital, systems, and transformation.